This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The death toll rises after a devastating tropical storm hits Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi. Clear similarities emerge between the Ethiopian Airlines crash and that of Lion Air last October. And New Zealand to introduce new gun control reforms after the deadly mosque shootings. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Somalia rolls out plans to launch a new currency. And a storytelling event honors those who sacrificed their lives in the struggle for a democratic South Africa. In our top story, we start with the devastating effects of a rare tropical cyclone on the southern African coastline and some bordering states. Now, more than 120 people have died in Mozambique and Zimbabwe after tropical cyclone Idai tore across the region. The toll in Mozambique had risen to 62 and 65 were killed in Zimbabwe. Authorities warn of a higher toll as many more are still missing. Idai battered central Mozambique, destroying 80% of the country's electricity network. And in Zimbabwe, some of the worst affected areas in the east are not yet accessible. High winds and dense clouds have hampered military rescue helicopter flights. Well, for the very latest on this, I'm now joined by CGTN's Farai Mokutuya, who is live with us from Harare. Farai, you know, it seems as though there's been a very devastating impact on Zimbabwe from this, terrible weather disaster. Just confirm for us the death toll that's emerged from Cyclone Idai and the very latest from the worst affected areas.
Well, Lindy, the death toll, the official death toll that we have just heard coming from the Minister of Local Government, and that is the ministry that is leading and spearheading this relief effort, is that figure has now crept up to 83. 83 is now the official death toll. And, some of these people now, these deaths, we've got 4 deaths in a province called Masvingo, which is not in the eastern highlands of the country. We've got 1 death in Mashonaland East. And so what this clearly shows is that this cyclone, this weather pattern is now moving across other parts of the country. The build-up of water, the swelling of water is also spreading and flowing to other parts of the country. And so we are seeing deaths in other parts outside of the Eastern Highlands. The Eastern Highlands remains the worst affected. And as you quite rightly said earlier, many parts of this country remain cut off. Bridges have been swept away, roads have been destroyed. But we do understand that weather has improved sufficiently for some of those military helicopters to now move in and be able to go through and rescue some of the people that have been trapped and left marooned. We have had a report where the military has gone in to uplift and take out students who had been trapped in a school. They had sought higher ground in the mountains, but the situation still remains dire. A lot of people there are still trapped. As much as 200 are unaccounted for and are missing.
And that is very worrying. You know, you paint a very worrying picture there, Farai. It raises the question of the preparedness of government, knowing that the cyclone was headed towards Zimbabwe. Just how prepared was the country, and how is government and other non-state actors, how are they all responding now?
Well, in terms of preparedness, we did see some warnings coming through from the Meteorological Services Department days before the cyclone hit Zimbabwe, and certainly before it hit landfall in Mozambique. We did see warnings from the Civil Protection Unit, which is the department that leads emergency responses. But I think what many people are saying is that, a lot of that information was disseminated in mainstream media, via social media, and largely concentrated in, urban centers. The communities who are bearing the brunt of this. These rural communities in the border towns with Mozambique, for instance, may not have received this information sufficiently ahead of time for them to prepare to evacuate and move to higher ground. But in terms of the response now, the CPU has marshaled and called upon the military, the police, other security services to come in and assist. We are seeing a large, response from corporates, from civic society groups, from NGOs, from community groups, churches, amongst others. A number of collection centers have been set up at schools, at churches, at offices across the country, and all, they're calling on people to bring whatever they have, whether it is money, whether it is clothing, food, fuel, whatever it is. They're asking people to bring that in, and all that will then be forwarded to these people in these areas that have been affected. Beyond shelter, these people will require medicines for those who are injured, medicines to, prepare and cater for, waterborne diseases, which will be a threat after this, and also just clothing, amongst others, because their lives, their homes have essentially been swept away, and they have to pick up the pieces and start from square one, so to speak.
Indeed, it seems that this disaster certainly bringing Zimbabweans together. Thank you so much. Farai Mokutoya joining us there live from Harare. And as he says, that death toll now confirmed to 83 people that have been killed by Cyclone Idai in Zimbabwe. Let's move on now to some other news. Initial analysis of data collected from 2 black boxes recovered from the Boeing 737 MAX 8 of the Ethiopian airplane crash now show that there may be clear similarities with the October Lion Air crash. Both planes reportedly experienced erratic steep climbs and descents, as well as fluctuating airspeeds before crashing shortly after takeoff. The flight recorders are now in the hands of France's Bureau of Investigation and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety. Ethiopian Airways Flight 302 was bound for Nairobi before it crashed, killing all 157 people on board. The BEA said they've sent the downloaded voice document to Ethiopian investigators. A preliminary report is now expected to be issued in 30 days. The disaster caused the worldwide grounding of the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. Questions have been raised about an automated anti-stalling system introduced on the aircraft. It is designed to automatically point the nose of the plane downwards if it is in danger of stalling. Now, the pilots of Lion Air Flight 610 struggled to control the aircraft as the system repeatedly pushed the plane's nose down following takeoff. This, according to the flight data recorder. Now, meanwhile, a grand commemoration and funeral ceremony for the Ethiopian Airlines crash victims has been held at the Holy Trinity Church in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Families were provided with some soil from the crash site to bury, as most bodies were destroyed in the tragedy. And now, moving on to in Kenya, a memorial service for those who died in the crash has also been held in the capital, Nairobi. Hundreds of well-wishers, diplomats and family members attended that ceremony that was held at the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
A week after Ethiopian Flight 302 crashed, killing all 157 people on board, a memorial service was held at an Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Nairobi for those who lost their lives. Candles were lit for each person on board the ill-fated flight.
Ordinary words fail us. It's impossible to remain mute to this irrevocable loss, so I offer these thoughts of outreach as we assemble together to remember our loss in common prayer.
The Russian people, and on behalf of the ambassador and the embassy staff and our colleagues, were deep in sorrow, were together, were united in these days, and when 1 week has passed after this terrible tragedy, which took life of 3 Russian citizens as well, and their souls, they went together with the souls of the peoples who perished from all the countries.
To those who have lost their loved ones, we say it was God's plan, and as you believe, We ask for God's peace to be with you.
Flight 302 crashed about 60 kilometers outside the Ethiopian capital Addis 6 minutes after taking off. On board were 35 different nationalities, with Kenya the most affected, with 33 citizens dead.
All of us Kenyans were deeply affected by the tragedy that befell all of us, Ethiopians and Kenyans, and many other people last Sunday.
Family members and loved ones of the victims were flown to Addis, but the airline now says it may take up to 6 months to get DNA results identifying the deceased. Ethiopian Airlines says families will get death certificates of their departed in 2 weeks. For many of them, a start, as they seek some form of closure to the tragic events of Flight ET-302. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
A candle for each of the Kenyan departed souls on the 10th March plane crash. 34 other candles for each of the other nationalities. Kenyans living and working in Ethiopia mourn the departed in the tragic accident that claimed 157 lives. Relatives and friends of the victims paid tribute to their loved ones.
Yoweri was a very competent, loving, and humorous person. It used to be fun hanging out with him, and I just want you to be assured and take comfort in the fact that Yoweri will always be remembered as a hero.
She's my fourth daughter, my fourth child, 30 years old. And as I heard a colleague of ours says, she left a child of 2 years and 4 months. She got married in 2016. So the family is devastated. She was a jovial lady, hardworking.
We have deeply lost a young girl. She had not known even a friend. I didn't know even if she had a boyfriend or a fiancé or something like that. But that is it. Fate has it that way.
DNA samples from the relatives have already been collected.
Most of the family members of the victims of the plane crash have accepted to wait for the results of the DNA, which the Ethiopian government says may take months.
Ethiopia, however, says DNA process might not identify all the 157. There is a possibility some of the deceased may not be traced from the remains.
And preparation for the identification process is already started, and we will make sure that the post-mortem investigation will be started as soon as possible.
France continues to investigate the contents of the flight data and cockpit voices received from the 2 black boxes found in the wreckage. Ethiopia says there is no definite timeline for when investigations will be completed. New evidence is now pointing towards possibility of the plane having had control issues. But for many of these families, all they seek is solace. And these stones collected from the plane crash site are all they take back home. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In Addis Ababa's Holy Trinity Cathedral, family members of the victims mourn over empty coffins. Many overcome with grief. Relatives were offered charred earth from the crash site to bury. Most bodies were destroyed by the crash impact and ensuing fire. The symbolic remains of Ethiopian citizens, including the 2 pilots and 6 crew, were part of those buried.
This would serve as closure for the family. According to our tradition, you try to forget things once you have reached this stage. We know that a person that is gone will not come back. Her husband is now left with an infant. He must shift his attention to his life and raising his baby. Her father and mother, including her sisters, are devastated by this grief, and everyone has to go back to their lives, as we cannot live like this forever.
All 157 people on board perished after a Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft heading to Nairobi crashed southeast of Addis Ababa.
This is a shocking and very saddening incident. Most of the people who perished in this accident were qualified professional Ethiopians and global citizens. It's very tragic, and I wish no one to go through this type of grief. From the young to old, most of them were well educated. It's a major loss. I pray to God to spare us from this type of accident ever again. This was indeed very tragic.
White flowers and portraits of victims were placed beside coffins. As investigations continue into the cause of the crash, families hope this ceremony will accord them some closure. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Indeed, a somber weekend for the victims' families. Now, speaking to CGTN, the father of one of the pilots killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash said he wants the crash site to be used as a gravesite for those killed and for a museum to be built on it in their honor.
From the onset, before and now, Ethiopia is sustained by the sacrifice of its children. The story of my son is no exception. He has paid the ultimate sacrifice. Therefore, my advice to the young generation is to come together and build this country, defeat poverty, as well as work for the peace of our beloved nation. I have a wish to see the crash site become a museum. It's a place where not only my child and other Ethiopians, but also people from 35 nationalities have fallen. I ask the government to secure that place and help us build graves for the deceased.
And let's turn to South Africa now, where aviation experts are calling on governments around the world to work together with the aviation industry to ensure greater coordination in aviation security initiatives. This emerged at the conclusion of a 3-day National Aviation Conference in Johannesburg. Global aviation continues to experience regular challenges on several fronts. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
As aviation undergoes a wholesale digital transformation, there's growing risk of calculated and premeditated cyber attacks by people with various intentions. Issues that include ideology, criminality, or attempts at state destabilization. The aviation industry relies heavily on computer systems in its ground and flight operations. The security of the airline systems can directly impact the operational safety and efficiency of the industry and indirectly impact its service, reputation, and financial health. The computer systems are many times prone to being hacked. These aviation specialists are asking for greater coordination between governments to ensure greater security in aviation.
Attacks always get better, easier, and faster. Right? So, I can go onto the internet now, I can buy a piece of malware in a couple of minutes that's customized for me, pay a couple of dollars, and I can use it effectively. The complexity of computerized systems means attack is easier than defense. So over history, attack and defense has always seesawed.
Currently, there is no legislation that forces anyone to disclose as soon as they have been hacked, which, as soon as that happens, it will take us a step further. But what will always remain a danger is that there will always be companies that are not even aware that they have been hacked. And those are the things that we need to address.
But for now, how then do countries mitigate the risks that come with cyber attacks?
You always need to know who is accessing your systems, from where are they accessing the systems, how are they accessing these systems, and what are they accessing these systems for? And that is, it sounds very basic, but think about it. When the hacker, in order for somebody to hack into your HR application, somewhere, somehow, they need to have access to your network.
Mwabelo further emphasizes that cyber threats cannot be efficiently combated by acting unilaterally. Instead, that the air transport industry must combine forces and find mutually supportive ways of dealing with this reality, sharing actionable community threat intelligence on an industry-wide basis. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. New Zealand set to introduce new gun control reforms after the deadly mosque shootings. And a storytelling event honors those who sacrificed their lives in the struggle for a democratic South Africa.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. We start in New Zealand now, where the government there is set to introduce new gun control reforms within the next 10 days. This, of course, in the wake of the deadly mosque attacks that killed 50 worshippers.
I've already made clear that a number of New Zealanders question the availability of military-style semi-automatic weapons in New Zealand. However, I will be giving a more fulsome set of details once we've worked through the in-principle decision that Cabinet has made today. I want to also acknowledge, when Australia found itself tragically in a similar position to what we find ourselves now, they took 12 days to make their decision. We have taken 72 hours. There is, though, still some detail that needs to be worked through. I want to do that, but still move as quickly as we can.
Now, meanwhile, Australian police say they've executed 2 search warrants in towns related to the investigation into Friday's mass shootings at mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. Police said on Monday a search warrant was issued at a home in the town of Sandy Beach on the New South Wales mid-north coast. They said the family of the Australian man arrested in Christchurch was assisting the police. They said in a statement that the primary aim of the activity is to formally obtain material that may assist New Zealand police in their ongoing investigation. Now, at least 9 people have been killed in Nigeria's northeastern state of southern Kaduna. The attack took place over the weekend in a small farming community. No group has claimed responsibility for this latest attack. Neither has any arrest been made as yet. But southern Kaduna State has seen a resurgence of violence in recent months that's led to the deaths of over 150 people. CGTN's Samson Omale reports.
Armed men attacked Nandubok village in Sanga local government area of Kaduna State, killing 10 people. The attackers invaded the village, shooting sporadically. Eyewitnesses said no fewer than 30 houses were razed by the assailants. The state government, through its spokesman, Samuel Aruan, confirmed the number of casualties in a statement. The latest incident comes on the heels of recent attacks on the neighboring Kajuru local government area of the state, which has resulted in the displacement of over 3,000 people.
I think the situation is just the same. People wanting to attack villagers, take over their lands, take over their houses, they occupy their houses. And I think except something is done, it will persist.
The State Emergency Management Agency has been drafted to the affected communities to provide relief materials. Samson Omale, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
Well, let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo now. In news that's just come in, at least 24 people have been killed and 31 others injured in a train accident. This according to police and medical services. A freight train was reportedly carrying stowaways on Sunday when it derailed in Benaleka settlement. That's 140 kilometers north of Kananga, which is one of Kasai province's main towns. Let's get you the very latest on this story. We're joined now by CGTN's Chris Ochamringa, who's live with us from Kinshasa. Chris, what more can you tell us about this train accident?
Well, Lindy, it happened last Sunday night at Benalaka, and the authorities managed to retrieve 24 bodies, but there were some wagons that fell in a river nearby, and so there are fears that there could be more people who are dead. The authorities are trying to do whatever they can to get the wagons out of the water, to check whether there are other people who died in that accident. And this isn't the first accident in the DRC. It's the third in about a month. And it has been blamed on the very old trains and the railway tracks that are still operational in that area.
And how then are authorities responding to safety concerns for the country's rail service? I mean, you mentioned old trains, old tracks. What is the government action in this regard?
Well, the government hasn't responded yet. Currently in the DRC, we don't have a Minister of Transport who's supposed to speak about such issues because the one who was there, Jose Makila, is outgoing. He was in former President Joseph Kabila's government, and current president hasn't yet appointed. But the situation is that the rail system in the DRC is very poorly maintained. Most of these systems were built during the colonial times. They haven't been serviced, and that applies to also the transport system. Very old cars are plying the roads in dangerous mechanical condition because, first of all, there are very many people in the country, and many of them are unemployed, and the government hasn't got an alternative, so they cannot stop these people from riding these cars in very dangerous mechanical condition and the railway service. So that's really the situation. There's no official communication yet, but the services are very poorly maintained.
Chris Ochamringa, thank you so much for that update, joining us there on the line from Kinshasa. Let's move now to news from South Africa. An international storytelling festival has been held in the country's capital of Pretoria. The Freedom Park event is a platform for remembrance to honor those who sacrificed their lives in the struggle for a free and democratic South Africa. CGTN's Yoweri Museveni has more.
Warp and weft, went the shuttle in the loop. Love is what I felt as I was being created.
It's an age-old practice. Storytelling is one of the oldest ways of communicating. Freedom Park's revival of the art of storytelling is aimed at ensuring that people gain an understanding of storytelling as a tool for social cohesion and social development. The festival also aims to encourage the transformation of cultural exchanges with neighboring countries to grow the arts, culture, heritage in Southern Africa.
Storytelling is our age-old tradition. It's one of the educational methods, but we have seen it in the recent years gaining popularity again, being put in the forefront like other performances within the arts and culture space. So it's very important that we have a day where we celebrate with the people, particularly with the learners, to share and reflect on ourselves through storytelling.
Freedom Park acknowledges that the art of storytelling suffered somewhat during the age of writing. It has, however, been more severely threatened with the advent of the digital era.
I think it's very important that we tell our children that let us go back to the fact that oral tradition storytelling was a way of transforming or passing information from one person to the other.
Performing artists from East and Southern Africa showcased their skills here. Freedom Park will continue to showcase the vibrant, content-rich storytelling festival on an annual basis. Yoweri Museveni for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Recapping your top stories this hour, more than 120 people have died in Mozambique and Zimbabwe after tropical cyclone Idai tore across the region. The toll in Mozambique had risen to 62 and it's believed 83 have been killed in Zimbabwe. Authorities warn of a higher death toll as many more are still missing. Idai battered central Mozambique, destroying 80% of the electricity network there, and in Zimbabwe, some of the worst affected areas in the east have not been accessed. Initial analysis of data collected from 2 black boxes recovered from the crashed Boeing 737 MAX 8 of Ethiopian Airlines reportedly show clear similarities with last October's Lion Air crash in Indonesia. Both planes reportedly experienced erratic steep climbs and descents, as well as fluctuating airspeeds before crashing shortly after takeoff. The flight recorders are now in the hands of France's Bureau of Investigation and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety. Ethiopian Flight 302 was bound for Nairobi before it crashed, killing all 157 people on board. In New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the cabinet backs in principle the changes in gun laws and will announce detailed gun law reforms within days. This follows Friday's attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, which left 50 people dead. The Prime Minister said that Brenton Tarrant, aged 28, a self-professed white supremacist who's been charged with murder, held the Type A certificate and purchased the weapons from legal channels. And Australian police say they've executed 2 searches in towns related to the investigation into Friday's mass shootings at mosques in Christchurch. Police said on Monday a search warrant was executed at a home in the town of Sandy Beach on the New South Wales mid-north coast. They said the family of the Australian man arrested in Christchurch were cooperating and assisting police. Those are your top stories this hour. And coming up in your business news, Somalia rolls out plans to launch a new currency. And Sudan secures $300 million from Arab funds to revive its ailing economy.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, Somalia is seeking assistance from a Kenya-based currency expert as it addresses a major currency crisis in parts of the country. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo reports now from Mogadishu on how the poor state of the local currency is affecting the daily lives of Somalis.
The new currency is expected to replace existing banknotes that are no longer in use in some regions of the country. This will be the first time authorities in the Horn of Africa nation print new banknotes in 3 decades, a major undertaking expected to cost the government more than $40 million.
Currency reforms are crucial for Somalia, and it's what we've been working for the past 12 to 18 months. Once we acquire funds for this exercise, we will publicize the tender and invite companies that print currency.
The new currency is expected to have smaller denominations compared to the current money in circulation. Traders in central Somalia have banned the use of local currency, claiming it's fake. The ban has affected small business owners who now want authorities to address the issue.
Traders have refused to accept the local currency. We have raised the issue with local authorities, but nothing has changed.
We stopped accepting the Somali shilling for almost 2 years now. We used to accept it before, but not anymore. We don't have any issue with the new currency. We welcome the initiative because as traders, we record good sales when we use local currency.
The ban on local currency in central Somalia has affected foreign exchange. Many currency exchange outlets have been forced to shut down as locals insist on the use of the dollar.
The ban on local currency in some regions of the country has affected many families. Those that operate foreign exchange services cannot earn a living anymore because people prefer using the dollar. The government must have a policy that will enforce use of the Somali currency across the country.
Mobile money transfer service is increasingly becoming popular all across Somalia. The country has been ranked as one of the most active mobile money markets in the world by leading financial institutions, with telecom companies continuing to provide that service at no extra cost to its clients. Leading banks also conduct their daily transactions using the dollar, increasing concerns among many as to how the federal government of Somalia will enforce the use of its new currency. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Let's go to Sudan now. The government has signed deals for loans worth $300 million with regional Arab funds. Now, according to authorities, the state looks to sign agreements to help address a foreign currency crisis that has fueled months of anti-government protests. The Finance Ministry secured a $230 million loan from the Abu Dhabi-based Arab Monetary Fund to support the balance of payments. Another deal worth $70 million was signed with the Arab Trade Financing Program, which is also based in the Emirates capital. Price hikes and food shortages triggered demonstrations in December that quickly escalated into calls for President Omar al-Bashir to resign. Inflation levels surged to more than 70% before the end of 2018. That's before dropping to 50% between January and February. The Egyptian government has invited international oil companies to apply for gas and oil exploration concessions in the Red Sea. This follows the latest discoveries of huge natural gas reserves in the East Mediterranean. Yasser Hakim has more.
10 new concession licenses to be distributed at once are the largest of its type in the country. The government is aiming to make optimum use of the potential of gas reserves in the area.
The newly tendered 10 blocks, they are in the Red Sea. And this is the first time that we tender out a call for exploration in the Red Sea. Our survey processes that took over the last year and came up with a very promising result that this area is having a potential, a heavy potential of hydrocarbons, and this is the reason behind tendering out this call in this time.
10 international oil firms have already registered on the first few days of issuance, though the door is still open till next August. It's considerably higher demand than previous concessions.
It is dealt with as a concession, where you give some preferences and incentives. This include, of course, tax exemption, some custom exemption as well. So these are the normal exemptions and incentives that we give to all the oil seas. In this case, and as I told you, because this area is a virgin area, we might give a little bit higher share to the IOCs because this is a challenge. It's a new challenge.
The latest discoveries have created an appetite for investors to tap into the natural gas market in Egypt. Egypt is self-sufficient in natural gas, producing about 7.5 billion cubic feet per day, all of it from the East Mediterranean gas fields. New concessions in the Red Sea will give a further boost to Egypt's ambitions to become a major natural gas exporter in the region. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
South Africa's state-owned power utility, Eskom, has announced it will continue with planned power cuts amid capacity shortages. The utility stepped up rolling blackouts following a cyclone in the region that knocked out communications and electricity pylons, affecting electricity imports from Mozambique. The Stage 4 rollout will now see more than 4,000 megawatts cut from the national grid on a load-shedding basis. The company, which generates around 90% of the country's power supply, has suffered operational and financial woes stemming from years of mismanagement and an overrun of massive costs. Now, Ethiopia has inaugurated a $61 million Chinese-built power distribution, rehabilitation and upgrading project. The project, funded by the World Bank, aims to cover the country's ambition of achieving nationwide electricity coverage. The program, which is the latest outcome of the cooperation between Ethiopia and China, seeks to mainly benefit the grid system in the capital Addis Ababa. Ethiopia's State Minister of Water, Irrigation and Electricity says the newly inaugurated project will have a great significance on Ethiopia's development endeavor. The 7 other targeted cities include Jimma, Dir Dawa, Bahirdir, Mekelle, Hawassa, Adama and Dessie.
The project's successful completion and operation is a major milestone for the mutually beneficial bilateral cooperation. There is no doubt that it will go a long way toward helping to promote social and economic development in Ethiopia and improving the livelihood of local communities.
We welcome healthy competition, and we are ready to work with everyone for the good of Africans.
These days the power is better after the rehabilitation of the electric network. In the past we did not get electricity for 8 to 9 days, but now we can get electricity every day without outages.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. How an initiative in South Africa is preparing young children for a possible career in cooking.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start in South Africa with that story. A unique children's cooking program is being organized in Johannesburg. A specially designed kitchen is used where the little master chefs are given the chance to bake or cook up a storm and leave a mess. CGTN's Zuli Sanjamela has more.
Inside this house, there's a specially designed kitchen for young master chefs. From as young as 3 years old, the young cooks experiment and explore with their culinary skills. So, let me lead you inside so you can see for yourself. Children here are encouraged to ignite their creativity and satisfy their natural curiosity in a welcoming environment. To explore and experiment in a child-friendly kitchen. Bright young chefs founder believes that cooking and baking with children can provide many beneficial learning experiences.
We are able to introduce them to reading, so we read through our recipe and we identify some words. We also work through some math, so we would identify numbers on our measuring cups and measuring spoons. We also work on their fine motor skills, and that is basically strengthening the muscles in their fingers, and we would do that by rolling our dough, using cookie cutters, whipping, beating. Also, we expand on their general knowledge. So, for example, when we're making pizza, we'll talk about where it originates, and that's Italy. And also, we introduce art, so they get to use their creative juices when they decorate their baked goodies.
Cooking can be great fun for all children. It can also be a good bonding experience between them and a great tool for learning. It also helps to improve the use of their senses.
The biggest benefit for me is that they can come, have fun and mess, and it's not in my house. And Tanya makes everything easy, so I don't have to do anything.
This program by bright young chefs also gives children the opportunity to develop a lifelong love for the culinary arts.
It's really fun here. I like it a lot. We learn how to make sausage rolls, pizza, Chinese noodles, and cake, with also cupcakes and cookies. I like to be messy. I like to make stuff.
It's a fulfilling exercise for bright young chefs Tanya George.
Seeing those little faces light up once they've received their baked goods, where they can't wait to show their parents exactly what they've created from scratch, and I think that's fulfillment for me.
The little ones also get to be introduced to foods that they wouldn't otherwise usually eat at home.
Yoweri Museveni for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And let's go to North Africa now, where the Egyptian Ministry of Social Solidarity is reviving a national program to shelter homeless people. Specialized teams have been touring 10 major cities, offering the homeless reunification with their families or a new home. It's part of a presidential initiative to provide underprivileged Egyptians with their basic needs. Here's Adel Al-Makhraoui with more.
There are no accurate statistics for the number of homeless children and adults in Egypt. Recently, however, the government decided to scan 10 major cities in efforts to provide them with shelter and basic needs. About 30% of them are believed to be here in Cairo.
We aim to provide children with shelter and full care. Then we start a rehabilitation process. If they need psychiatric assistance or healthcare, we contact relative ministries to assist. If they have families, we try to find them and bring them together. But the numbers of those we rescue keep changing because sometimes they leave their families once again, or some families send them to foster care.
The Ministry of Social Solidarity has called upon the public to assist by reporting the homeless through its hotline. 17 rescue vehicles are now roaming Egypt in a national campaign to provide them with shelter, decent food and health care. Each team is made up of 5 professionals, including a psychiatrist, social worker and a nurse, to engage properly with each case.
We're usually in dangerous neighborhoods, and that affects our work. There are places with high crime rates and illiteracy. People don't understand what we do. Sometimes people think we are harming the children, but our staff have huge experience in that field.
2,500 districts are planned to be visited in this campaign as Egypt tries to lift up the living standards for its underprivileged citizens. It's an ambitious plan. Unfortunately, not everyone wants to leave the streets life.
Some cases refuse help, whether they're children or adults. In that case, we give them a sort of break from their harsh life. We give them blankets to keep them warm in the cold and a hot meal.
The program has been dubbed We Are Here For You. By providing these services even to those who plan to leave, the team hopes kids would be tempted to return to these aid centers whenever they need. These children will not stay here this time. Others, however, have been fed up from street life.
I used to be a street vendor selling shoes, but suddenly the authorities took my stand away. I didn't have money to restart. I couldn't pay rent. The landlord bared with me a year, then asked me to leave. I've been 3 years in the streets. Haven't contacted my family since. The team found me and offered me to stay in a better place. They filed a report and then came back to me.
Around 4,000 people have been rescued and serviced so far. The challenge is huge, but Cairo appears to be determined this time to reverse this cycle, which pushes many people to live in the streets. And hopefully, many areas like this one will be replaced with proper shelters for those who need it. Adel Al-Makhraoui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's stay in Egypt, this time on a lighter note. The country has been attracting a growing number of Oriental belly dancers in the last few years. Cairo is seen as an entertainment hub in the Arab world. CGTN's Yasser Hakim met with a foreign belly dancer who is creating a buzz in the North African country.
Belly dancing is part of the cultural scene in Egypt, and successful belly dancers become movie stars of famous celebrities. Belly dancers are so much in demand today that they're not only found performing in nightclubs, but now in weddings, in birthdays, and in boat rides, such as this cruise on the Nile. And aspiring belly dancers, like French dancer Sonia, have come from many countries seeking fame in Egypt.
I come here because I have opportunity. I make audition in Nile Maxim, in a famous boat. So I work 1 month in Cairo, 1 month in Paris. So after I decide to close my school in Paris and come and live Egyptian life. For me, Egypt, Cairo, it's mom of Egyptian and of dancer. So for me, I think all the people here are so proud about dancer. here for my art and passion. It's amazing. I love here, yes. Because everything is possible. Nobody in Cairo will say, no, this is what I love.
With a lot of competition, it requires huge effort to reach the top. Sonia's work in Cairo has opened doors for opportunities in other countries, even in China. She travels to China regularly to perform and give training sessions for women who want to learn belly dancing.
First time I go to China, it was before 2 years in Shanghai. And it was so crazy for me. In the class, no one say to me, Sonia. All the students say to me, teacher, please teacher, can you ask you this question? Please. They have something respectable, amazing. They have very good level. Why? Because Chinese don't, she's not lazy people. When they want something, they will work like crazy to get it. I love this mentality.
She's quickly becoming a popular name in the Egyptian entertainment scene.
What we can see is that there is more demand for foreign oriental dancers, and Sonia has been attracting a lot of attention in that field. She's truly a professional dancer, committed and takes work seriously, which is crucial for success.
Just like many others before, Sonia hopes her next step will be acting in cinema or TV series. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's take a short break. Your sports news coming up next. Coming up, hundreds of stranded Nigerian World Cup fans deported from Russia.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, in your sports news, more Nigerians who were stranded after last year's World Cup could be deported